This aid is disgraceful. We are not dogs to be made to run after aid. People fought over it. We'd rather die of hunger with dignity than die in humiliation and filth.
We are not dogs. That was a Palestinian in central Gaza criticizing aid airdropped into the region. For some, the food in these boxes is the only meal they will eat today. Some Gazans have called the airdropping a, quote, insult to their dignity. And they'd rather have aid formally distributed instead of having to fight to get their hands on just the most basic necessities. This all comes as President Trump has broken with Prime Minister Netanyahu on whether mass starvation is taking place in Gaza. CNN's Jeremy Diamond joins us now from Jerusalem. And Jeremy, the president's words were notable. Netanyahu says no starvation. Trump says you can see it happening before your eyes.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jim. The Israeli prime minister continuing to deny the reality of starvation on the ground in Gaza, even as his government has now taken steps to implement effectively ceasefires for 10 hours a day in certain parts of the Gaza Strip to help facilitate the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. We have seen those tactical pauses now go into effect for the last 2 days. Yesterday, we know that about 120 trucks from the United Nations were able to make their way into the Gaza Strip. And so we are starting to see efforts to alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But even as that is happening, the Israeli prime minister is still denying reality.
There is no starvation in Gaza. We enable humanitarian aid throughout the duration of the war to enter Gaza. Otherwise, there would be no Gazans.
We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that. So we're going to be even more involved.
And now President Trump also talked about establishing food centers in Gaza. Nobody really knows exactly what the president is talking about. He could have been referencing those Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites, which are backed by, established by a private American organization, now backed by money from the U.S. State Department, but have also been where the majority of the violence that has taken place as people have tried to make their way to those aid distribution sites and Israeli forces have opened fire. Now, in terms of the impact of these latest Israeli policies, these tactical pauses and all of that, it will really be judged by how long those policies actually remain in effect, as the United Nations makes clear that much more aid than just 100 trucks a day is going to need to get into the Gaza Strip in order to even begin to alleviate what is happening in Gaza. But those new Israeli policies to facilitate the distribution of aid in Gaza are perhaps the best evidence yet, Jim, that Israel has in the past restricted the flow of aid distribution in Gaza. And of course, they could have taken these steps, which the United Nations and other aid organizations have urged them to take for much longer now. They could have taken those steps, for example, before the 77 people inside of Gaza who have died of malnutrition in just the last month passed away. Jim.
Jeremy Diamond in Jerusalem, thanks so much. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton, who served 4 tours in Iraq, in the Marine Corps, and now sits on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for joining.
Good to see you, Jim.
So President Trump says the U.S. will be more involved. I mean, the fact is it already is as a partner in this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Is it safe to say that that foundation is failing in its job of feeding the people of Gaza and that responsibility should go back to the UN and other aid groups that had the responsibility prior?
Well, there are a lot of problems with the UN as well, but it's obvious that Gazans are not being fed enough. And the simple fact that there's all this fighting over aid shows that there's not enough aid to go around. This is a point that I made to the Israeli ambassador when I had him in my office last week. We had a very robust discussion. And he asked me, how did you do it in Iraq and Afghanistan? I said, in 20 years of war, you never saw people fighting over aid. And God knows we had a lot of problems in Iraq and Afghanistan. We made a lot of mistakes. But we never had people fighting over aid. We never had terrorist groups controlling aid because there was too much to go around. There was enough to go around. Right. And that's the fundamental mistake that I think the Israeli government is making here from a strategic perspective. If they want to win this war, they shouldn't be limiting aid.
And you've been on the record for that. You wrote a piece back in October 2023 saying that Netanyahu needs an endgame. I wonder if there's a fundamental difference there, because I remember covering, and you know this better than me, having served in Iraq and Afghanistan, that it was the calculation of U.S. commanders there that you had to win hearts and minds, right? That part of the battle was being an effective manager of life, not making the people suffer. I mean, are you saying that Israel is either deliberately or by acts of omission making that mistake, that it does not consider taking care of the people of Palestine, of Gaza, to be their responsibility?
Well, I think it's important to start by pointing out that a lot of Israelis do believe this, including a lot of people I've spoken with in the IDF, who understand basic counterinsurgency doctrine here, which is that you have to win hearts and minds, and you have to have a political endgame that both sides can agree to, can believe in, because that's ultimately how you have peace, both for Palestinians and for Israelis. But it doesn't seem that the way Netanyahu, the prime minister himself, is running this war acknowledges that reality of how you win a conflict like this. And it's telling that Prime Minister Netanyahu, I'm sorry, Jim?
No, go ahead. I was going to say, to your point, it was notable that not only the president contradicting Netanyahu, but Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who posted, "I can unequivocally say that what happened to innocent people in Israel on October 7th was horrific, just as I can unequivocally say that what has been happening to innocent people and children in Gaza is horrific." Is this a possible moment of rare bipartisanship on the approach to the war in Gaza?
Well, I've been trying to find common ground here for a long time, because the basic principles here are things we should all agree with. And I say this as someone who is a longtime supporter of Israel. I strongly believe in Israel's right to exist, something that Hamas denies. So we should be able to establish the basic goals here that we're all trying to achieve. One, Hamas needs to be eliminated. And I want Israel to win that fight. I think that's essential for peace in the Middle East, for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. You cannot have Hamas, an organization with the destruction of Israel written into its charter, ruling Gaza at the end of the day, or any part of Palestine, right? But we can also all agree that innocent people on either side should not be killed. The attacks of October 7th were horrific, and anyone dying of starvation, of course, is horrific as well. Yeah. So if we can establish these basic goals, then we can say, what's the strategy to get there? And I'll tell you, I want Israel to win this war. I don't think that allowing Gazans to starve is a good way to get there.
Yeah, and certainly a lot of suffering for the people of Gaza.